We're going to perform a valgus osteotomy on a proximal femur using the Orthopediatrics locking plate set. We're going to utilize a 150-degree plate. The first step in the procedure is to use the angled guide to select a 20-degree osteotomy. We pull this back and move this 20 degrees less than 150 to 130 degrees. We're going to place this into the proximal femur. In the absence of C-arm, we're going to just project this over to make sure that we're going into the center of the femoral head or slightly inferior. We'll place the wire through the guide and drive it up into the proximal femur. Normally speaking, you would drive this up to the level of the proximal femoral physis. In the absence of C-arm today, I'm placing this up through the head to make sure that we're in the center of the femoral head. We'll go ahead and remove the guide, and we're going to utilize the blue-handled guide. The guide with the preloaded tubes is placed over the guide wire, ensuring that the tubes are parallel to this guide wire. You can see there's a lot of flexibility here, and we could change that alignment. So there are you need to pay attention to exactly the direction of these upper two tubes are parallel to the wire. At this point, when performing a valgus osteotomy, there will often be a gap between the upper level of the plate and the lower level of the plate, and that's okay. Next, we're going to place the more proximal of the two wires. These wires are driven up to the level of the proximal femoral physis. The more inferior of the upper wires is then placed, and then at this point the osteotomy is performed. You could perform this either by removing a wedge or alternatively by performing a single cut. This osteotomy will be performed with just a single cut. At this point, we'll go ahead and cut through the level of the inferior portion of the lesser trochanter. If the osteotomy has been performed, a second cut can be utilized to shorten the femur if that's necessary. At the same time, we'll shorten this approximately ½ centimeter. And here the osteotomy has been performed, removing a ½ centimeter of bone to allow for shortening. At this point, the guide is removed from the guide wires, and this will sit on the lateral side of the femur, and we'll place the guide wire tubes onto the plate, and that will achieve this correction. At this point, the tube's have been placed. The bottom tube is slightly off angle to the others. This allows the screws to ultimately be placed at a convergent angle and increases the strength of the construct. To allow the plate to sit flat, we'll remove this corner of bone. The plate is then placed on the guide wires and pushed up to the level of the bone. You can see this allows the plate to sit securely against the proximal femur. And then the plate clamp is used to secure the plate to the bone. Just like in a varus osteotomy, you have to take care to adjust the rotation appropriately. At this point, the guide tube is removed from the more anterior tube. You measure the depth of the screw, you drill it with a cannulated drill, and then place a screw. Repeat the process for the more posterior guide, and then place a guide into the most inferior tube. Again, measure, drill, and replace it with a screw. At that point, compression screws are placed proximally in this hole and distally into this hole, securing it to the shaft. And then a final locking screw is placed into the middle hole. Although it appears that there is a gap between the bone, there's secure bony contact here, children heal so well that this is not a concern in healing. And that completes the osteotomy.